Okay, so one of the problems that students seem to have is learning how to acquire and store in a very organized fashion the data that they get. So for this, we're going to take a look at downloading some census data. The plan is to join that with some data from the violent crime, some violent crime statistics that we're going to get from the FBI, and to assemble all of that in the context of a file GeoDatabase created in ArcGIS. So to get started, I'm going to launch ArcGIS. And while you can use ArcCatalog to create file geodatabases, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just use the toolbox window to do that. So I have my search window up. I'm going to use create geodatabase. And I have a lot of options. There are a number of different kinds of geodatabases you can make. You can make enterprise geodatabases, which is what you would create and use if you were deploying the data in kind of a larger setting where more than one person is going to be updating the data. In this case, what you're going to do, there's also a personal geodatabase. That's been largely supplanted by the file geodatabase listed here. So that's what we're going to use, file geodatabase. We're going to create that geodatabase. In this case, we're going to use one of the folder connections that I've got already to the desktop. I'm going to create a folder. Right here. And I'm going to call it the Violent Crime GeoDatabase. So I hit add. Like a lot of dialog boxes within Arc, you choose the location first and then you create the name. So in this case, I'm going to call it the Violent Crime GeoDatabase. And I'm going to use the current GeoDatabase version. There are some legacy versions that you can use, but in this case, we're just going to be moving forward, so we're going to use the current version. Now you'll notice that I used underscores here to connect my words. This is just kind of an old habit. So some systems occasionally still have problems with spaces in the file names. So just to be sure that I'm not going to run into that, I'm going to put the underscores in there. You could probably get away with not doing that, but it's an old habit of mine. So we'll hit OK. We'll wait for the dialog box to come up, and it'll tell us that that geodatabase has been created. And then we're going to start downloading the data that we're going to want. So here's our dialog box letting us know that the data has been created. If I go back to the desktop, I can take a look inside my folder, and you can see that I've got a violent crime geodatabase.gdb folder. And then I've got a number of different files in here that are going to represent my data eventually. At the moment, this is all empty. These are all sort of files in preparation of what I'm going to add into it. But I just wanted to show you the internals of that really quickly. So let's take a look in Arc, or rather, let's take a look at in Windows in our browser here. And what I want to do is download some of the data that we're going to need. Now, because we're going to be displaying data at a county level, we're going to want county files. We're going to want to get our data from the census. And we're actually going to be using a set of files called the boundary files. So cartographic boundary shape files is the name of the section that we're looking for. You can see that I've got a big list here. If I actually chose this option, I've got nation-based folders I can download by state. I can use at the FTP server to download some of this stuff, which I might do. But in this case, what I really want is just a county level files. You can see that this is distributed at 3 different resolutions. So 1 to 500,000, 1 to 5 million, and 1 to 20 million. This is going to depend on the total scale at which you're going to display your data. The more you work with this, the more you'll have a sense of what these numbers should be. The 500K is going to be a higher resolution. You're going to have a lot more detail than the 20 million. In this case, I'm going to be making a map of the United States as a whole. So I'm going to download the 20 million data set. On my desktop, what I want to do to keep organized is I'm going to create a new folder called download. and I'm going to store all of my data in there. So if I go to show in folder, here's the data that I just downloaded. I use a program called 7-zip, which is a freeware program that lets you work with many different kinds of archive data. If you're working with Windows, you might just use extract all. In this case, I'm going to extract to CB for cartographic boundaries 2014, which is the vintage of this data. Minor changes in between county lines could happen from year to year. This lets you know what year you're working with. US, so that's the scope of my data. County is the resolution, and then 20 million is the scale at which it was prepared for. So we'll unzip there. And here is my shapefile made up, as you know, of a number of different files. So the geometry is stored in here. You can see that accounts for most of the file size here. We do have a little bit of attribute information stored in the DBF file, but most of the data is stored in the geometry. Now we're going to want to add this into Arc. So I'm just going to. You can use the add data box up here, but you can also just drag and drop in. So here's the data. These are again just boundary files. I can zoom in on the lower 48 here, and here's Puerto Rico down there. And we can see that this is a nice outline of the United States as a whole. I can look at my scale up here at this scale where it's drawn on the screen. I have a scale of 1 to 31 million or so. So that lets me know that the 1 to 20 million is an appropriate level. If I brought in the 500K, it might be at too high of a resolution and look a little bit strange on the screen. If you look at the attribute file of this data, you can see that it's pretty thin. So we've got information about the shape, which is linked in here. We've got a state FIPS code. We've got a county FIPS code. We've got an extended sort of GeoID with a prefix up here. This GeoID is kind of the key. This is the one we're looking for. This is a combination of the state FIPS code and the county FIPS code. So state FIPS code is 16, county is 017. So the GeoID is 16017. That's Bonner County. I don't know what state that's in off the top of my head. We've got an area in square meters by land, and we've got an area of water in square meters there. So these are important figures that you may want to know about this particular county. You can't necessarily trust the geometry. If you're careful with your projections, you could recalculate this. But it's nice to have this area pre-computed for you so you don't have to worry so much about projection issues. Now what I'd like to do is export this to my GeoDatabase. Shapefiles are nice, but we're going to be creating a newer data set that's going to have a lot more information in it. We're going to do that within the file GeoDatabase. So I'm going to minimize this, and we're going to go to File, Data, Export Data, and we're going to export all of this data into my Violent Crime GeoDatabase. And we're going to use the same name for this feature class layer as we had coming in. So that's going to help us keep things organized. So CB 2014 US County, US County 20 million. Okay, so this lets me know where this came from. It's going to be easy for me to locate that later on if I need it. So we'll hit save and OK. Exports all of that data. We can bring it back in. It's obviously just a copy of what we had before, so it doesn't look any different. I'm going to remove the old shapefile layer. And now if I take a look at the properties of this, we've got the layer name here. The source lets me know that this is actually in the Violent Crime GeoDatabase. So we'll hit OK. I wanted to take a look at the second data source. So you can Google for this. This is the Tiger Line data with selected demographic and economic data already attached. So while you can download the simple sort of Tiger Line files and then download the demographic data separately, it's such a common use for this stuff that they've pre-joined a lot of that information. So it's a really handy way to keep track of this. So I'm going to be using the data from the 2010 census. We could download this in GeoDatabase format, but I'm just going to stick it back into my GeoDatabase, so it doesn't really matter. So we're going to download this in shapefile format. I want the counties. We'll download that into my download folder. We'll wait for this to come in. You'll notice that this is quite a bit bigger. So this is a 77.7 megabyte file. The extra file size in this is coming from the fact that this is a lot more detailed of resolution of an image. So the geometry is quite a bit better and more accurate. But it also has a lot more attribute data. So when we unzip this file and we take a look at that folder, you'll see that the geometry itself is 118 megabytes, so quite a bit bigger. And the associated attribute information is almost 6 megabytes on its own in comparison, I think, to the 500 megabytes that we saw before. So, or 500 kilobytes, I'm sorry, before. So quite a bit of extra information encoded in this file. So we're going to add this in. Now, you might notice one thing right away. I'm going to reshuffle these a little bit. So one thing that you notice is that the cartographic boundaries contain these cutouts for the Great Lakes. So they look quite a bit better around the edges. You'll notice similar sorts of issues around Florida. So if I zoom out, actually let me just zoom to the full and zoom back in. So you'll notice a couple of extra changes, and so the blue is a lot more like what we would want to see. The green sort of is a bit misshapen when it comes to the area around the Great Lakes. So this is why we wanted the cartographic files, but we did want the data inside here. If we open the attribute table, you can see that we have information about. We've got the same geo ID that we had before. We've got the name. But we also have information about the populations. Now these are all encoded, so we have a sort of a code that indicates what this is. So DP0010001. We don't necessarily know what that is offhand, but if we go back into our data, one of the things that's been distributed along with this is an Excel file. DP_table descriptions, and what this is an explanation of what those different fields mean. It would be difficult to sort of write all of these things out as field names, but by doing it this way, we get some nice information here about what those fields are. So DP0010001 is the total population, but we can also get information about the total population under 5 years old. Between 5 and 9 years old. We have demographic information about the population of men in those age categories versus women. We've got information about median ages, race, relationship information, households. So quite a variety of extra information is in here, things that you might want to know when you're making your maps. So we'll shut this down for now. So we need to export this data to our GeoDatabase. So I'm going to take this information and export that. So data export. We're going to want to export it back into our violent crime GeoDatabase. We're not going to want to name this export output. You always want to try to rename this something that you can understand. In this case, again, I just want to use the same information that we had because that helps me sort of tie the data that I have in my GeoDatabase back to original data if I lose track of it. So I'll hit save. We'll export that data out. So it's going to export all of the counties. We'll add it back in temporarily, and we'll get rid of our old shapefile-based version. So this is essentially just what we had before, except now all of our information is in the GeoDatabase that we created.